Okay, so we'll get started. One of the great things about the Share Your Passion programs is that we really get to know one another in a different way, sometimes from the way we usually know each other. You all know Liz as co-president currently, and Phil as past president, and both of them wear many other hats at the synagogue. But you may not have known that they were both passionate about tracing their family trees and have done a lot of work in those areas. And they're generously willing to share that information and knowledge with us tonight. So I'm going to turn this over to, I guess Phil is going to get started.
Yes.
All
So,
yours.
Helene, do I have the ability to share screen?
I hope so. I think you should be able to. Give it a shot and see what happens.
Okay, fine. Okay, so thank you all for joining us this evening rather. So let's start off with some what I call them genealogy research notes. So even though my surname Friedenreich sounds German, it's not. My family originated in Poland. In fact, nobody knows how Jews acquired their surnames. All that we know is sometime between 1790 and 1820, European Jews got surnames. So, as I said, my family is from Poland. And so there are 600 towns in Poland with Jewish records covering about 120 years, from about, did I say 1900? Yes, 1900 to 2020. There is what's called the Date-Mokotov Sound Index. And what it does is that it compensates for spelling variants. So for example, Friedenreich, F-R-A-J-D-E-N-R-A-J-C-H, is the way that my family name was spelled in Poland. But you can see that there are lots of variants, and I've only given you some of them. So some websites allow you to use what are called wildcards. And so for example, so a wildcard is an asterisk. And so for example, if I entered into the website FR asterisk, DENR asterisk, you can see that that would handle all of the variants of my family name. One of the things that people interested in genealogy should do is to interview their family. Well, I kick myself for not having interviewed my maternal grandfather, Aaron Eliyahu Weisacker, and as a result, I cannot go back farther than his parents because the birth, marriage, and death records were lost, destroyed. I'll fix the spelling later. But you also have to be careful. I once interviewed my great-great-aunt's brother-in-law. I subsequently found out that he had gotten all the generations of my complex Friedenreich family mixed up. And it took me a while to sort that out. One of my Friedenreich cousins once told me that her family would visit another Friedenreich family on a regular basis. And I asked her, well, what was the exact relationship? And her response was, well, we're cousins. What else matters? So I hired two professional genealogical researchers, one for Lodz and its surrounding communities, and one for Warsaw and its surrounding communities. So let me give you some, I'll put up my family tree. Let me close this one and put up another. Wait. That's okay. Let me put up a different one. Okay, so this is my Friedenreich family tree.
Bill, you're not sharing.
I'm not sharing.
No.
Let's go back here. Did I get out? Am I still
You're out.
Pardon me?
You're out. You're just not back in.
Well, here I am. I can see myself.
You have to do share screen again and then open the document.
Okay, let's go up again. Let's try it again. Share screen. And I want to do this one. Okay, so here is my Friedenreich family. Let me tell you that it goes on for 119 landscape pages. And so you can see that well, let me give you some background first. So as you can see, it's a Word document. I don't use a genealogy program. I use a Word document. This document is searchable just as any Word document is searchable. I've made the decision that I will always spell the name Friedenreich, F-R-A-J-D-E-N-R-A-J-C-H, no matter how others spelled it, because vowels don't matter. I've also made the decision to use a common spelling for all given names. In other words, all first names, except in the modern period. And the reason I do that is because, therefore, I can search on a first name. And then my Friedenreich family is huge. So my 4 greats grandfather, who's listed here as Pincus, he had more than 18 children through 3 successive wives. One of his children, his next to youngest child, Bezalel, had 20 children through 2 wives. And so my family is huge. And so that led me to the decision that if a woman was born as a Friedenreich and married out, in other words, married a non-Friedenreich, I do not track her and her descendants unless somebody else provides me with the information. And if somebody else provides me with the information, then I'm happy to do that. So let's take a closer look at this particular page. So you can see up here under Hershik, okay, there is a reference. It's Groyetz 1851 4D. And so what that means is that the death record, D stands for death, it's the 4th death record in the town of Groyetz from the year 1851. And so as you scroll down, you can see that I have a reference here for every entry. Sometimes the reference is me because I have interpolated the information. If you look, let's see, over here, the line where my cursor is, it says Ludge, B-O-R. That's Ludge Book of Residence. And so basically what that is, it's a census, okay? And in the census, it tells you everyone who lives in that particular household. And so books of residence are very important sources of genealogical relationships. The next thing you can see is that this area is in gray. And in my family, cousins married cousins. It happened a lot. And so when that happens, you get the entry appears at least twice. So it appears for Jacob Wolf because he is a descendant of Israel Isaac, but it also appears for the woman he married, Yachet, known as Ida Friedenreich. And I can show you where she is. She is on page 28. So let me scroll down to page 28 and I will show you her. Okay, here she is. And so it turns out, and I'll let Liz correct me if I'm wrong, but she was Jacob Wolf's first step cousin twice removed. Okay, so again, remember that my four greats grandfather had 3 wives. I'm descended from the first. She is descended from a different wife. That brings in the step. And then she is of a different generation than her husband. I can tell you that when Harriet and I lived in Los Angeles for a couple years, and when we contacted her, she couldn't figure out who we were. I must admit, I couldn't figure out who she was because I didn't have all this information at the time. And so we didn't connect. And then a number of months later, Harriet and I are taking a Shabbat afternoon nap, and she calls and she says, "Why didn't you tell me who you were? You know, I now know who you are. Why didn't you tell me?" and so, at any rate, we finally did connect with her and meet her face to face. Let's see. I decided that I would not give you genealogical resources on because it's very technical. But anyone who's interested, if you send me an email, I will be happy to send you a list of genealogical resources. For Jews of Poland, the premier website for Jews of Poland is jri-poland.org. And JRI Poland will be coming out with a next generation website and search engine first week in December, and it will allow researchers to do a lot more wide-ranging searches than one can do right now. So I think I've covered what I want to cover, and I don't know whether you would like to ask questions now, or whether maybe Liz should give her presentation, and then you can ask each of us questions.
Well, there's no immediate questions, then I can start. If I try to share my screen, I don't know if I'll be kicking you out or not. Well, I'll start by saying I go about genealogy slightly different. I think it's very impressive that Phil does it all in a Word document. I use software. I use a mixture of online, Ancestry.com, and something called Roots Magic, which is a software downloadable program. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you Ancestry.com, and picture just for a moment what Phil just showed you his family tree looks like. Now you're going to see, can you see that? This is what my family tree looks like. So these people right here are my parents, who are actually on this call. Hi, Mom and Dad. And I put everything into Ancestry. People worry about privacy with Ancestry or any of the genealogical programs like Family Search and Jenny. I think for me, Ancestry is the easiest to use. Family Search, I have a hard time with the interface, but it's also easy to use. Both of those sites, you can choose to make your tree completely private. And so nobody can discover it. They can see there's a Ravich family tree, but that there's nothing on it. It looks like it's empty. I have chosen to make my tree public, but to make living people private. I don't know if that's the default setting or not, but that's what I've chosen. So now my parents are both still living, and you can see them because you are actually in my account. You are looking as if I am looking. And I like using the genealogical programs because A, you can upload pictures. I went on a binge right before school started, the end of August, uploading a lot of pictures. Obviously, I have not finished uploading my pictures, but it's a lot of fun to be able to see the people. Someone like this dude here, Abraham Ravich, he is my grandfather's twin. And just a little bit of family lore, when I was doing a family tree project in 3rd grade, my dad told me that my grandfather had a twin sister who died at birth. Actually, through genealogical research, I found out he had a twin brother who died when he was 1. So it's really interesting. So I won't actually ever get a picture of Abraham because he died when he was 1 year old. But that baby is my uncle, who I never met. Okay, so this is what an ancestry tree looks like. And you can follow the people. I've chosen just to show you my father's side of it. And I'll talk about why I'm doing that in a moment. You can choose your settings. So you see, my mom changed her last name to Ravich when she got married, but in my family tree, she's Arlene Karp. And I do that. I know Phil doesn't follow the women in his family. I do. And I find it easier to list the people by their maiden names than by their married names. So my mom's legal name is Arlene Ravich, but in my family tree, she is Arlene Karp. You can see next to each of the people, this is my dad, this is my mom, they have these little boxes. That means there's a further family tree for those people. So if I were to click on my father's box, you'll see that it's going to go down a generation because this is just lagging a little bit because I was already showing you up a generation. So now you can see me, my sister, and my brother, and all of our children. I've chosen to keep my ex-husband in my family tree without a picture because he is still the father of my children, and so I want him as part of my tree. Now, Sarah is also trying to investigate that side of her family tree, and we have linked our trees. So if you look at Oren's tree, there is actually more information here. And that is because Sarah and I have linked our trees. So if I click on that, you will actually see the tree that Sarah is investigating with the Weinberg side of the family. So I choose to do Ancestry, again, because I find it easier to use than Family Search. You also can see this little symbol next to my name. That's because I chose to test my DNA. And if I click on that symbol, and I know if I switch windows too much on Zoom, it makes people dizzy. If I click on that symbol, it will pull up all of my DNA matches. And now I'm going to really embarrass my parents because I found out through Ancestry DNA, they are 5th or 6th cousins to each other, which is really kind of cool. I also found out, for those of you who know Meredith Sherman from Bethel, she and I are 4th cousins. And I found that through DNA as well. So you can find a lot of interesting things if you choose to test DNA. If you look over here at my cousin Paul, he has this little leaf. That means there's a hint for him. If you choose to go the route of Ancestry, be very, 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 very careful about accepting the leaves, the hints. I am the kind of person, I will look at 100% of the hints. You can see for the most of my tree, there are no hints. I've gone through them already. Paul's hint showed up today when I logged on. I haven't looked at it yet. I don't know what it is. Unless I am 100% sure that that hint is that person, I will either ignore it if I know it's not that person, or put it under maybe if I need to do some further investigation. So if I go to Paul's hint, I'm not sure what it is. We'll see. My dad might know the answer better than me. A hint will pop up. Again, it's a little slow because of Zoom. And I will have to decide whether or not I want to accept that hint. It's not popping up. It's just going to be slow. Okay. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is the pitfalls of following women in your family tree. So this is my grandfather, Frank Ravich. These are his parents, Benjamin and Fanny. Now it's easy. If you can see Benjamin, I actually don't have a picture of him or Fanny. So I've chosen to use his gravestone as his picture. This is the good thing about looking for gravestones. If I click on the picture, and I don't know if you're going to be able to see this on Zoom or not, I easily found out what my great-grandfather Benjamin's father's name was, because on the tombstone, it says, a little blurry, Baruch ben Yehuda Halevi. There it is. Now I know that my great-grandfather's Hebrew name was Yehuda. Fanny, my great-grandmother, it says Fana Zelda Bat Aliyah. So I know that my great-great-grandfather's name on that side was Aliyah, but I don't have a last name. I don't know where to go from there. So it's much easier to follow the men in the family than it is to follow the women in the family. But I'm also really stubborn. And so I choose to investigate the women if I can. So one thing that Phil talked about, his family's from Poland. This branch of my family is from Russia. So I am going to show you, I'm going to stop sharing this screen. I'm going to share another screen instead, which is a revisionist list, a Ukraine revisionist list, which is the same as their census. This is from Jewish Gen. Jewish Gen is a wonderful wealth of Jewish genealogical research. The website is simply jewishgen.org. It is not the easiest site to navigate, and it will take a lot of patience to figure out how to navigate it. In September, they were supposed to update their interface and they never did, possibly because of COVID. I don't know why, but we're all hoping, those of us who use Jewish Gen a lot, that the interface will be much easier to use once it's updated. So anyway, so this is the revisionist list from 1858. So this is the census from the Ukraine, Russia. You can say I'm from Kiev, I mean, in 1858. Okay. The other pitfall of Jewish genealogical research is simply geography. I just messed up. I said Kiev, Russia, Ukraine. The borders in Europe changed so often that it's very confusing. My family, this family, the Ravich family, they lived in Russia, but Kiev is no longer in Russia. So there's a lot of confusion, and you really have to be very determined to figure out where your family is from. Also, you all know how I spell my last name, Ravitch. This is Rajvich, and Phil already addressed that with the sound X and things like that. So anyway, I finally was able to find Yudel, who is my third great-grandfather. And once I found him on this revisionist list, I already knew his name through other research. It then helped me find out that his father's name was Moshe Gertz. If you look up a little bit, Moshe Gertz is the son of Abram, who's right up here. Abram's father was Gersh David. So Gersh David, or however you pronounce that, is my 5 great-grandfather. If you do the math, and I'll do it for you, you have 32 fifth great-grandparents, 32 of them. I know the name of one of mine, Gersh David. I don't know how to pronounce it, but that's his name. I have been unable to go any further than him. The thing about these Ukraine revisionist lists, or even the Poland, any of the Eastern Europe revisionist lists, is they have not all been translated. And I don't know about any of you, I don't speak Russian. So I was kind of stuck waiting for them to translate. This is from 1858. Once more of them are translated, I hopefully will be able to go back further, but right now I'm stuck. As Phil mentioned, really before the turn of the century, 1700s to 1800s, Jewish families did not have last names. It was just so-and-so, son of so-and-so. So it's really hard to figure it out. Phil said that it's hard to figure out where we got our last names. Ravich, I don't know where it came from. My mom's maiden name was Fuddleman, which means a fiddleman. He played the fiddle, he played the violin. And that's where we got that name. So sometimes you can figure it out. It's also difficult because a lot of them changed their last names. So my dad's mom, her last name was Wasserman. And then half of the family, there were 13 children, half of them, we don't know why, changed it to Weiss. So there's a lot of rabbit holes you can fall down when you are researching your genealogy. I'm going to share a third screen just really quickly. I'm going to show you the software program. A lot of people don't feel comfortable tracking their family history online because they feel like it can be stolen, it can be used in the wrong way. I will warn you, and I apologize if anyone here has any stock in the site Geni, Geni. I highly recommend you not using that site. If someone looks at my Ancestry Tree on Ancestry.com or my tree on FamilySearch.com, they can't change it. I gave my parents permission, so if they log in, they can change stuff on my tree. But any of you, you might see something that's related to your tree. I mentioned Meredith Sherman before. She can't change anything on my tree, even if it's wrong. She'd have to contact me. On Geni, anyone can change anything on any tree. So I would be really careful about using Geni. Just my recommendation. So I'm going to just stop sharing this, and I apologize. I know it gets dizzying, and I'm going to share one more thing, which is the program I sometimes use, which is called Roots Magic. Okay, so this is Roots Magic. Can everyone see that? I hope. And what I have chosen to do with Roots Magic is to periodically download my information from Ancestry and then upload it to Roots Magic. And that way it can be completely in sync. I have not done that in a while, so it's not as big of a tree as it is. On my Ancestry tree, I have 709 people. On this tree, I think I have something like 300 or 400 people. So it's not as complete because I haven't used this tree for a while. Also, I use the free version of Roots Magic because, again, I have chosen to do my tree on Ancestry. I pay for an Ancestry subscription, but you can also buy the full version of Roots Magic. It is this and Family Tree Maker are the two, in my opinion, best software programs you can buy if you don't want to do an online tree. And it's a matter of your preference, because it's what I feel very comfortable, and I have found a lot of wonderful things on Ancestry. But I do have a cousin who was my mom's cousin who was just taking any hint she saw on Ancestry, she took it. So she has a lot of people on her tree that really are not part of our family. And I've talked to her about it, and she's trying to take them down, but then it gets confusing and all of that. So again, if you're going to do Ancestry, I like it because I found out a lot of information, but just be careful of falling down that rabbit hole of putting people on your tree who don't really belong on your tree. Okay, so that's my basic background of what kind of software you can use. And I'm going to stop sharing that. There's one other thing that I wanted to talk about, and I'm just going to kind of use a thumbs up, thumbs down method to see if you're interested. When I tell people that I'm into genealogy, people always say, what does it mean to be my third cousin once removed? Is that something people are interested in hearing about? Because I will give you a really brief, okay, we got a thumbs up. So I lied. I'm going to share screen one more time because I find it really interesting. Okay, so the hint for understanding that is to know that it matters on who the common ancestor is. Okay, so we all know I have the same two parents. So I have a brother and a sister. That's who they are. My dad, sorry, Dad, I'm not using you. My dad doesn't have any brothers or sisters. He's an only child. My mom has a brother and a sister. We all know her children, their children would be my first cousins. Okay. I apologize. My dog is going a little insane, so I hope you hear me and not him, but this is his bad time of night. Sarah's really trying to keep him quiet for me. Okay. So you want to go to the person who is the common relative. So if it's your great grandparents, okay, if that's the same generation, you will be second cousins. But let's say my great grandparent is this person, whoever it is, but I want to know how I'm related to someone that's the second great grandparent, not their great grandparent. That's where the removed comes in. So my cousin Ashley, I'm using her as an example. She's my second cousin. We share the same great grandparents. Ashley's daughter is my second cousin once removed because she's one generation different from me. Okay. It gets really confusing, but basically, if you are the same generation, you are whatever cousins, first, second, third, fourth, and so on. If you are not the same generation, depending on how many generations there are between you and that common relative, that's how many times removed you are. So what I recommend is, and I can email this table to anyone, but what I recommend is you either making an Excel spreadsheet and figuring it out yourself, or if you use Ancestry.com, what can happen is you can click on any single person on your family tree. It doesn't matter. And they will tell you the relationship. So I can click on Yuddle, the person I showed you before, and it'll say he's my 3 great grandfather. I can click on Ashley. It'll say she's my second cousin. I can click on her daughter and it'll say she's my second cousin once removed. So if you use something like Ancestry, it kind of populates it for you. If not, you can make a spreadsheet with those common relatives and fill everybody in. And I am so more than happy to help you do that because it can be really confusing until you kind of get the hang of it. So if you can send me a basic family tree, I can help you figure out who's your first cousin once removed, your third cousin twice removed, and all those different things. So that's my spiel for the evening. And now I guess Phil and I will both open it up to questions. And Mom and Dad, thanks for letting me use you.
Here.
Hey, Liz, it's Leon. I'll ask the first question. So where do you start? It just seems so daunting. Where do you start?
So Phil might have a different answer than me. I started in a really kind of ridiculous way. I took all of my grandparents, I looked at their last names, and I decided who would be the easiest. Boy, was I wrong. I thought that Ravich would be the easiest because how many Raviches can there be? It's actually one of the hardest for me to follow because there are so many variations of spelling of Ravich as I go back in the genealogy. But once I decided to start there, I kind of stayed there. I didn't say, oh, this is too hard, I'm going to go elsewhere. So I started researching my genealogy when I was on bed rest with my kids who are now 20, for those of you who don't know. So it was quite a long time ago. And I went in and out of it as I went on, as time went on. I really started again in earnest once quarantine started. So I got through Ravich and I got through one of the other surnames by the time I started work again. One of them, which I thought would be harder, wound up being the easiest, which is my mom's maiden name, which is Carp. There's two spellings. It's K-A-R-P and C-A-R-P. That's it. I thought it would be harder. It actually wound up being easier. So the answer of where to start is just pick a grandparent and start there.
Thank you.
Well, I guess I would do things differently. My expectation is that one or more of your ancestors arrived in the U.S. through Ellis Island. And so and there's a search engine for Ellis Island. So let me back off for a moment. Genealogy is not a no expense hobby. Okay. So in order to use Ellis Island, you must actually make a contribution to Ellis Island or Statue of Liberty Ellis Island. Now, you can make a $54 contribution and it's fine. And that gives you entree to Ellis Island. And the same is true for JRI Poland, for Jewish Gen, that in order to have maximum search capability, you need to make a contribution. For JRI Poland and for Jewish Gen, the minimum contribution to make to have full search capability is $100. But it's tax deductible. It's tax deductible because these are 501c3s. And so, yes, you can deduct it on your tax return, but it still costs you money. And so let me bring up another share your screen. Okay, I gotta, wait a minute, I gotta go to share my screen again. So here are some genealogical resources that you can use. Avotenu is probably the foremost literary magazine. It's a quarterly, and also you get a weekly email.
I love the Mormons.
A Jewish Den I've already mentioned, JRI Poland I've already mentioned, Ellis Island, Statue of Liberty I've mentioned. Now, Stephen Morse has a search engine specifically for Ellis Island, okay? And if you go to stephenmorse.org, he will give you a form that you can fill out that will make it a lot easier to find your relatives at Ellis Island. And the good thing about Ellis Island is if you can find the ship manifest is normally 2 pages. And this is the form that the ship's steward filled out before they left Europe. And on the second page, it will tell you who is their contact back in Europe. And it will also tell you who they are going to visit in, or who are they going to see in the US. And so that gives you additional information. The Mormons, it's a free website. Obviously, the Mormons, the reason it's free is that they microfilmed birth, marriage, and death records in Europe because they can redeem your ancestors. You know, again, if you're not Mormon, you're not going to heaven. And so therefore, they wanted to make sure that anybody could redeem their ancestors. And they have been caught redeeming Holocaust survivors and people who died in the Holocaust. There's Yad Vashem, which has testimonies of survivors and their relatives. The US Holocaust Museum has various collections of Holocaust-associated materials. Roots to Roots gives you maps, archival contacts, historic materials. I'm also a member of the Czestochowa-Radomsko Area Research Group, known as CRARG.org. Daniel Kazez is an independent researcher. And then finally, there's Ancestry. And the annual cost at Ancestry is $149 on up. So, going back to your question, Leon, I would go to Ellis Island first.
My one caution about Ellis Island is I spent a lot of time looking for my mom's grandfather. And as it turns out, he didn't come through Ellis Island at all. He came through Halifax, through Canada, down from Toronto into the States that way. And so I spent a lot of time actually looking through Ellis Island. And then I wound up getting his, I don't know if you can see that. I have his naturalization paper that said his ship on it, and no ship by that name ever came through Ellis Island. So I was able to find out his route into the States. So the majority of people did come through Ellis Island, but there are a number of other ports they could have come through as well.
Yes, that's definitely true.
Mary, do you have a question?
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Mary?
Oh, also, if you're a native Philadelphian, like I am, chances are, your grandparents or great grandparents came right to Philadelphia, which is the case for my situation, which is kind of neat. I wanted to know what you thought of the approach of, I'm really fortunate that my dad, who would be 101 if he was still alive today, had the presence of mind in the 70s, the 1970s, to start this research, and then later put it on software, kind of like a family tree maker. And I have printouts, landscape size, they're probably like 75 pages worth. So he did a lot of the background research. What do you think about the biggest glitch now is kind of keeping it updated to the present. So kind of starting with the present and then working backward, because these people, you know, are obviously alive, and there's cousins, and then they got married, and there's like so many generations now. I don't want to lose the present, and might get more stories that way. What do you think of that approach?
I mean, just picking up his tree and going to the present, or
I mean,
reordering his tree?
I will go back even further, but I mean, for now, just trying to like keep it current, because it's obviously it seems like it's falling into disrepair. And another thing is, my sister had the presence of mind. It was about 3 or 4 years ago. She did a Madway, that's my maiden name, family reunion in Philadelphia. Over 100 people were invited, and we got about 62. And then people were supposed to fill out a form and do the updates, and of course they didn't. It's kind of like, I don't want it to get away from me, but
Well, the thing is, Mary, that you can spend a lot of time on this, and you just have to decide how to budget your time or what you want to spend your time doing. Because for me, it's never ending. In my family tree, I didn't show you the entire family tree. I have what I call hanging chads. I mean, I have branches, and when I say branch, I mean I have branches that go on for like 10, 15 landscape pages, and I can't link one to another. Again, one of the reasons is because of my four greats grandfather. I said had 3 wives. I think I'm descended from the first wife, but I definitely don't know all of his children. And so far, I haven't been able to find them all. Okay, and once I can find them all, then I might be able to link all these chads together. You know, I came in contact with someone new a couple months ago, and I need to know his grandfather's name. Well, we know exactly where his grandfather is buried in Israel. And I said to him that you've got to figure out how to get a picture of the grave, and then we can go from there.
So it's really like detective work and
Yes,
stories, and you have to kind of figure out. I mean, you can really, like you say, just never ending.
It really
Or
is.
to have your children stay interested in it, maybe. It's like, what are the stories? How do you chronicle the stories that you find out? Because it is more than names and dates on a piece of paper. It's the stories.
On Ancestry, there's a way, and I do chronicle some of the stories that my parents tell me on Ancestry itself, and those are completely private. Even for the dead people, the stories are private. That's my choice. But to go back to your other question, Phil mentioned it in his presentation. I didn't say it, but I agree. Talking to the older relatives before they die. I hate to be blunt about it, but if you're going to do the people who are alive now, start with the older relatives, because they're not going to be around as long for you to ask questions.
well, I mean, you know, for these people who didn't fill out the forms, Mary, you know, obviously you met them. They know who you are. You don't have to introduce yourself.
Right.
And so if you have contact information, then it's just trying to convince them to give you the information that you need. With respect to family stories, I write them out, and I have them in my paper file.
Very nice. Thank you.
And you mentioned Philadelphia. There's also the Jewish Genealogical Society of Philadelphia, which is, I think, a great resource.
Yes, I'm a member of it.
Me too.
I usually don't attend meetings, but next year, the International Genealogical Convention will actually be held in Philadelphia. I think it's the first week in August. It's usually about that time. This year it was all by Zoom because of the virus. Next year I hope it won't be, and therefore you can attend. I mean, it's going to be 3-4 days. There will be thousands of people there, assuming that it's safe for people to travel.
Elizabeth, didn't some relatives, once you started looking, they contacted you, like that woman in Baltimore?
Yeah, I've had some people who have reached out to me. I've reached out to lots of people, but I've also had people who have seen my tree. Again, on Ancestry, I made myself. You can't see me in my tree. I'm just a blurb, but my contact information as the owner of the tree. I have my email address, and I've had people who, reached out to me. I actually have an entire list. I don't know if it's going to come up. People I have contacted, and it's the name of the person, the date I contacted them, and then either it's the different family or I've been in touch with them. And I just, as I went through this list since the beginning of the pandemic, these are all the people I've contacted. And the one who related Meredith Sherman and I is on that list.
I can tell you that I've been contacted. Well, what happened was Harriet published a book. Someone wrote to her and said, I know Friedenreich is not your surname, but can you help me out? And so I contact him, and guess what? I know more about his family than he does. And this week, just this past week, one of my distant cousins died at age 98, 99. You might have seen her. She had a very small obituary in the New York Times. And so her niece called me, and I started giving her niece all of the dates, birth dates and everything else for her children and her first cousins. And it's great fun, I must admit.
Any other questions?
I think Arlene had a hand up before.
Oh, yeah, actually, one of the things that I noticed you mentioned was Castle Garden, and I know that all my grandparents were born in the US, and it was all the great grandparents that came over, and so that would have been the end of the 1800s. I don't know if it's 1870s, but are there listings for Castle Garden?
Yes. So Castle Garden existed until 1892, and then Ellis Island. What you also have to keep in mind is that if someone traveled to the US first class, they did not go through Ellis Island or Castle Garden. They got off the ship and they were free to go wherever they wanted.
Interesting.
Well, because if you could afford to go first class, right, then you weren't going to be a public charge.
Okay. Huh. Interesting.
And so I can't find the arrival of my great grandfather. I can find the arrival of his wife and children, but I can't find his arrival. And so one possibility is that he came in first class.
Oftentimes the families would come separately. The father would come over with the oldest son, or sometimes alone with a brother, and then would send for the wife and the children later on. So oftentimes you're not going to find a family on the ship together. You're going to find a disjointed family, two different ships, sometimes 3 or 4 years apart from each other.
Right.
Yes. And someone asked before about tracking names. Some names are very common. And so the name Horowitz or Gorvitz, it's a very common name and you will have great difficulty tracking it.
Mhm.
You would think that my maternal father's name, Weisacker, would be easy, but because it's unique, it is not, because the records of the town were lost. And so Friedenreich, as it turns out, is easy to find. And, everybody knows I'm a Kohen. And so therefore, there is another Friedenreich branch that originated in Ursprung in Germany. And multiple children came over pre-Civil War, and their family is Reformed, and they don't know whether they are Kohanim or not. And so I do not know whether I am related to them.
Carol, did you have a question?
It was just a little aside. Arlene, my grandmother also came through Castle Garden, and whenever it was noisy in the house, she would say it sounded like a regular Castle Garden. So
Mary?
I wanted to ask both of you the role of, you mentioned, Liz, that you did the DNA stuff. I wanted to ask you both the role that has played in your search. And the second question would be, what has been the most either surprising or profound or amazing discovery that you've had in this journey?
DNA has been helpful to me, but it's been more fun than helpful. I didn't find any, great information yet. I hope that I will. Like I said, it was funny because Jews are basically an endogamous population. So if you go back far enough, everyone was from the same town, which is how I found out my parents are fifth or sixth cousins. Meaning that they had the same great grandparents. I mean, they're not related, but DNA wise, they are. So for me, that was the most mind-boggling thing that I found. But I found it funny. I think my parents, my dad found it funny, my mom not so much, but I think it really depends. I think I was resistant to do it because I was afraid, oh my God, my DNA is going to be out there. But it's so little that you're actually doing, and you can choose I did mine through Ancestry to have it destroyed. I chose to have them keep it because in the future there's going to be more tests and I'm going to want that further information. Right. But you can choose to just have it done now and then destroyed.
Well, I also did my DNA through Ancestry, and as one might expect, I am 100% Eastern European. And so it's like, it didn't help me at all. And it was not a surprise.
And what has been your most profound discovery through this journey? Or
mine came actually, sorry, Phil, go ahead.
Phil.
We have met some wonderful people. I've spoken to some wonderful people that we wouldn't have known otherwise. And so it's been, very rewarding.
For me, I found out through a family reunion that my mom's grandmother, so my mom's grandfather came over with the oldest son, found a place to live, and then sent for the grandmother and all the younger children. The baby, the youngest, died on the boat. And she refused. A lot of times when that happened, they would give burial at sea. She refused to allow that to happen. So she got off the boat in England to bury the kid. And the original boat that they were supposed to be on sank and everyone died. So Because that baby died, she was going to die anyway, right? I'm here.
Wow.
It is an amazing story.
Phyllis, you're muted. It doesn't say you're muted, but I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm muted.
You want me to tell your story?
Yeah, I don't
I
think.
know what she's going to say. Phil, you mentioned that you're 100% Ashkenazi Jewish. Phyllis thought she'd be 100% Ashkenazi Jewish, but she's 25% Italian or something.
Oh, I don't know.
Something like that. I forget exactly what. But through DNA, she found out she is not 100% Ashkenazi Jewish. That's what you're going to say, right?
Depends on what their base is anyway that they're working with. So, and that can grow over time. That's my contribution.
Any other questions?
Oh, I guess they didn't hear me.
I heard your mom. And like Phil said, if any of you guys have any specific questions, I mean, he said you can contact him for the genealogical website. So I'm happy to help you guys out as well. I've helped Phyllis. I'm happy to help other people as well.
I want to thank you all so much. This was wonderful. This was really very informative and really interesting. You can contact Liz and Phil if you want some more information. If you guys want to send us to send Barbara those resources, we could also put them up on the website if you prefer to do it that way. So, you know, however you want to work, it's fine with us, but we can make that happen.
Last minute question.
Yeah, Barbara.
There's a couple different DNA choices to make for Ancestry.com and others. How do you decide which is the one to select? This is what I've been waiting for.
I chose Ancestry simply because I use Ancestry for my tree. My dad chose 23andMe. There's a site called GEDCOM, and you can upload your raw DNA data to that site and compare it to the other sites. You can also I uploaded my DNA to Family Search. So there are sites that you can upload to. I don't know, Phil, why you chose Ancestry.
Because it was supposed to be this most centralized DNA platform, if I remember correctly.
But if I'm correct, didn't they have a few different choices, Ancestry.com? Like there was one for this price, there was one for that price. There was like 3 levels, and I had no idea where to go.
You can do just the basic DNA. You can do the DNA with traits. And then there might be a third one. It's basically how much information you want to derive from your DNA. I mean, I took the attitude of if I'm going to do it, I might as well do it all. But, you know, I've actually, and honestly, the traits part of it, I found useless.
What do you mean by traits? You mean like the
like, you know, I'm more likely to have curly hair because of this trait, or, you know, I thought it would be more like a 23andMe, more of like a gene thing, but it wasn't.
Thank you.
So it's not about your susceptibility to like diseases, for example.
It did. I mean, it said I was more susceptible to certain things, you know, some of which I actually have, which is funny. But then it also said, you know, because my sister had breast cancer, I'm more likely to have it. But that had nothing to do with my DNA. That has to do with my genealogy. Like, I don't know. I found the traits part useless.
23andMe, I took it way back when they were giving more information, and I found it to be very good because it showed that I didn't have the BRCA gene, which actually helped my daughter when my other daughter, when she was diagnosed. But I found it to be pretty good, except it didn't say anything about my hair.
Good one.
You don't have any. There you go.
Cute. Wow.
Elaine, thank you so much for putting it all together.
Thank you both for doing this. It's very generous of you, and we really appreciate it. So thank you.
Great program.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night,
Thank you.
everybody.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Congratulations.